Have you ever felt like your brain is in a constant tug of war, pulled between, I don't know, 1,000 different thoughts, all demanding your attention right now?
Hmm.
Or maybe you've struggled to simply start that important task you absolutely need to do, even when it's like looming large and time is ticking away.
Yeah, that feeling of distraction or just being completely overwhelmed.
Right. We've all been there. It's pretty universal, I think.
It is. But, for some people, this isn't just a fleeting feeling.
Yeah.
It's a persistent daily reality. It's like a deep current shaping their entire lives.
Exactly. And for millions of adults and kids too, these kinds of struggles, they aren't just about willpower or personal failings.
No, absolutely not. They often point to something deeper, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD.
ADHD, right.
And it's a condition that is, well, profoundly misunderstood, I'd say. It goes way beyond that stereotype, the hyperactive kid bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
ADHD significantly impacts how people interact with the world, uh, their work, their relationships, even their own sense of self-worth. It's big.
And that's exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We're going to really try and unpack what ADHD truly means.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal is to move beyond those common, often, let's face it, simplistic misconceptions. We want to reveal its core defining features, its surprisingly varied presentations across different people,
Yeah, it looks different for everyone.
and the profound, often kind of hidden impact it has on daily life. Then, importantly, we're going to pivot to the practical side.
Okay.
We'll explore some science-backed strategies for managing symptoms, gaining a greater sense of control, and ultimately thriving.
And along the way, we'll introduce some key vocabulary, some terms that will really deepen your understanding of this complex condition.
Right.
So you can expect a journey into like the brain's unique wiring, a close look at some surprising conditions that often coexist with ADHD.
The comorbidities.
Exactly, comorbidities, and a whole toolkit of actionable steps that can genuinely help turn chaos into maybe a bit more calm.
That sounds good.
Whether you suspect you might have ADHD yourself or you know someone who does this deep dive, it offers you a shortcut to being well-informed. You'll get surprising facts and practical guidance that can truly make a difference.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this. So when most people hear ADHD, like you said, their mind often jumps to that image, right? The super energetic kid who just can't sit still.
Right. Maybe talks incessantly, struggles with homework.
Yeah, it gets reduced to just hyperactivity and poor focus, mostly in children. And honestly, I think even many clinicians, maybe historically, have had only a superficial grasp of what it truly is.
I think that's fair to say.
But it runs so much deeper than that, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. We really need to completely reframe our understanding here. ADHD is fundamentally a neurodevelopmental disorder.
Okay, neurodevelopmental disorder. What does that mean exactly?
So what that means is it's a condition that impacts how the brain develops and how it functions. It's not, and this is crucial, it's not a character flaw.
Right.
It's not a conscious choice, and it's definitely not a sign of laziness or a lack of intelligence.
That's so important to emphasize.
It is. It's a medical condition that fundamentally shapes how a person's brain processes information, plans, organizes, completes tasks,
Yeah.
those core functions. It is not caused by laziness or a lack of discipline or intelligence.
So it's really about the brain's operating system, maybe, not just a willpower issue. That really does challenge the common perception.
Exactly. It's the underlying machinery.
I've heard Dr. Russell Barkley, who's a prominent researcher in this field, describe ADHD in a really insightful way. He calls it a performance disorder. What's
Yeah.
he getting at there?
Barclay's concept. Yeah, that's a brilliant and I think truly illuminating way to put it. Well, Barkley explains it like this. Think of ADHD as a performance disorder. He says, people with ADHD know what they need to do, but they struggle greatly at times to transform intention into action.
Transform intention into action.
Okay, whether that's preparing for a test or finalizing an important project at work. So this is a core struggle, and it's directly tied to difficulties with what we call executive functions.
Executive functions. Those are the brain's management skills.
Pretty much, yeah. Those higher level mental processes that let us concentrate, plan, organize, prioritize, remember things, complete tasks, all that stuff.
Got it.
So the challenge isn't usually knowing what to do, it's the consistent ability to actually do it.
Okay, like you have the map, but getting the car to actually drive there reliably is the hard part.
That's a great analogy. The knowing is there, but the doing is the challenge. And this directly refutes that misconception of laziness because the knowledge and the desire, they're almost always present. But that bridge to consistent action, well, it can be incredibly difficult to cross sometimes.
So it's not a lack of desire to achieve, it's the path to achieving it that's uniquely challenging because of these executive function difficulties.
Precisely.
And you mentioned the brain's wiring being different. What is the research, with brain imaging and so on? Tell us about how ADHD brains are actually wired differently.
Yeah, the research has been incredibly illuminating, especially in recent decades. We're seeing quite clearly now that ADHD brains worked differently, with wires connected differently compared to neurotypical brains.
Okay.
For a long time, there was a lot of misunderstanding because we just didn't have this clear picture of the neurological differences. Now we know there are distinct differences in specific brain areas and the communication pathways between them.
Like what kind of differences?
For example, people with ADHD often have lower levels of dopamine.
Dopamine, the reward chemical?
Yeah, it's often called that, but it's crucial for regulating attention, motivation, learning, movement, lots of things. So lower levels can really impact focus and drive.
Okay. And other brain areas?
The prefrontal cortex is a big one. Think of it as the brain's CEO, the command center for those executive functions we just talked about. Planning, decision-making, working memory, self-control. It's impacted in ADHD.
The CEO is working differently.
In a way, yes. And the striatum, which is deeply involved in reward processing, motivation, and impulse control, also functions differently. These differences in the neural networks, they aren't a choice. They are neurological realities.
Right. It's biology.
It's biology. It fundamentally alters how attention, motivation, impulsivity, and self-control operate. And these aren't just abstract scientific facts. They explain why something that seems simple, like starting an uninteresting task, can feel incredibly difficult.
Or why sustaining focus is such an uphill battle.
Exactly. It directly impacts those executive functions.
Okay, that neurological piece is so important. Now, that brings us to what Dr. William Dodson, another leading expert, calls the 3 defining features. He argues that everyone with ADHD has these, and neurotypical people don't, and they often get overlooked.
Dodson's work is fascinating here, yes. These features really get to the core experience.
Let's dive into them. What's the first one?
The first is what Dodson calls an interest-based nervous system.
Interest-based nervous system.
Okay. This isn't just about having generally poor focus, it's more specific. It's a biologically based challenge with attending to an uninteresting task, maintaining their focus, and sticking with it until finished.
So it's specifically about uninteresting tasks.
Exactly. Think of it less like a break-in spotlight that can't focus at all, and more like a highly, highly selective spotlight.
Okay.
If a task isn't inherently stimulating or novel or urgent or personally engaging, their brain struggles immensely to sustain attention on it. It's like the on switch just won't flip.
But if it is interesting...
Then it's a different story. If it is interesting or engaging or urgent, they can often enter a state of intense hyperfocus.
Hyperfocus, right, I've heard of that.
Yeah, they can focus for hours, often to the exclusion of everything else around them. Time disappears. They might forget to eat or sleep.
Wow. So it explains those incredible bursts of creativity or deep dives into passions you sometimes see.
Exactly. But also that profound struggle with the mundane, the everyday stuff.
That makes so much sense. It's like the brain is wired to seek novelty and engagement, which makes those routine, repetitive tasks a real uphill battle. Okay, what's the second feature?
The second is emotional hyperarousal.
Emotional hyperarousal.
This refers to intensely strong emotional responses, often feeling disproportionate to the actual situation.
So feeling things more intensely.
Much more intensely, yes. It's not just about feeling emotions strongly. It's like the emotional thermostat is set way higher. This makes it incredibly challenging to regulate reactions and bounce back from setbacks.
So small frustrations can feel huge.
They can feel like catastrophes, yeah. And positive emotions can also be incredibly heightened. It makes for a quite tumultuous internal experience, and that can really impact daily interactions and relationships. It's not about being overly dramatic. It's about the volume control on emotions being turned way up.
That sounds exhausting to live with.
They can be, absolutely.
And the third feature, this is one that might be new to a lot of people listening, but it sounds incredibly impactful. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD.
RSD. Yes, this one is huge and often goes unrecognized, but it's one of the most common and profoundly disruptive parts of that emotional dysregulation in ADHD.
Dysphoria.
That sounds serious.
It is. The word dysphoria itself is Greek for unbearable. And that's precisely how patients describe the feeling.
Unbearable.
It's a sensation of severe physical and emotional pain that gets triggered by rejection, criticism, or teasing, whether it's real or just perceived.
Perceived rejection, too.
Yes, that's key. And the emotional intensity is described as being well beyond all proportion to the nature of the event that triggered
So it's
it.
not just feeling hurt or disappointed.
No, not at all. Patients often describe it as feeling like a physical wound, a profound gut-wrenching ache. It's an overwhelming, often physically painful reaction to what they perceive as interpersonal slights or failures.
And this constant fear of rejection, this intense pain, it can lead to a profound, often unconscious attempt to protect a very fragile sense of self from perceived judgment. It highlights the deep shame and fear of failure that many people with ADHD carry.
And I imagine that must severely impact things like taking risks or forming relationships or even just speaking up in meetings.
Absolutely. It can lead to people-pleasing tendencies, avoiding situations where they might be judged, or reacting defensively to feedback. It's incredibly limiting.
Wow, RSD. That sounds incredibly challenging and, frankly, isolating to live with. Okay, so moving beyond these core features, ADHD isn't just one thing, right? It presents so differently in different people, and some struggles are definitely more hidden than others.
That's exactly right. It's not monolithic at all. And one of the most overlooked presentations is the inattentive type of ADHD.
The inattentive type, so not the hyperactivity people usually picture.
Correct. When you think ADHD, hyperactivity often comes first. But for many, particularly adults, that overt hyperactivity might decrease over time or maybe manifest more as an inner restlessness, like they can't relax.
Right.
The inattentive type, though, often just flies under the radar. People with this type are not lazy, stupid, unwilling, or oppositional. That's not it at all.
What are they like then?
They're often described as creative, outside-the-box thinkers whose minds stray from uninteresting tasks. They might seem daydreamy, easily distracted, forgetful, struggle to follow instructions or finish tasks. Their brains might even tire more quickly from the sheer effort of trying to sustain focus on those unstimulating things.
And this is especially true for girls and women with ADHD, isn't it?
Yeah.
Their symptoms often go unrecognized for a long, long time.
It's a critical point. Dr. Ellen Lippman's work here has been invaluable. She highlights how girls often learn to mask their inattentive traits and internalize their feelings.
Masking, so they hide it.
They hide it, consciously or unconsciously. They work incredibly hard to appear normal, to compensate for their difficulties. This makes their symptoms harder to recognize by parents, teachers, even healthcare providers.
Which leads to later diagnoses.
Much later diagnoses, often not until adolescence or adulthood when, as Lippman puts it, unhealthy coping skills start to undermine their sense of self. They might appear quiet, maybe anxious or perfectionistic, rather than overtly disruptive.
And I read they might even censor themselves with doctors, say they're fine when they're not.
Yes, that's another point Lippman makes. They might downplay their struggles, say medication is fine, even if it isn't working well, because they're so used to masking and perhaps fear judgment or not being believed. It's a significant issue, leading to years of unrecognized struggle and potentially harmful coping mechanisms.
That's truly heartbreaking thinking of all those years of struggle. Okay, what about time blindness? That's another fascinating concept that sounds like it impacts daily life hugely.
Time blindness. Yes, clinical psychologist Dr. Ari Tuckman talks a lot about this. It's a profound challenge. It basically means individuals with ADHD are more absorbed than others by what is happening now.
Stuck in the present moment.
Very much so. They struggle to disconnect from present distractions, present thoughts, present feelings, to accurately perceive or plan for the future. Time feels less like a line stretching forwards and backwards and more like just now.
So planning ahead is hard.
Extremely hard. Planning for future deadlines or events often doesn't really happen until the future becomes the present and the scramble begins.
The last-minute panic.
Exactly. They might consistently underestimate how long tasks will take or miss deadlines altogether, not because they don't care or they're irresponsible, but because time itself feels abstract, immediate, not tangible or linear.
I can definitely relate to getting caught up in the now, even without ADHD. And they connect so well to another term I find really insightful, procrastivity. It sounds like a contradiction.
Doesn't it? Procrastinate activity.
But it perfectly captures a common ADHD experience, doesn't it?
It truly does. Procrastivity, it's that clever blend. It aptly describes a tussle common among adults with ADHD who are always busy but never seem to make headway on life's important goals.
So they're busy, but not productive on the right things.
Exactly. Instead of tackling the critical, maybe difficult or boring tasks, they stay occupied with more palatable but less critical tasks. Maybe organizing their desk instead of writing their report, or researching a new hobby instead of paying the bills.
I see. So they're not idle. They're just not making progress toward those significant long-term objectives that truly matter.
Precisely. It's that implementation problem again, that intention-action gap. Knowing what needs doing, but doing something else instead. Often because the important task feels overwhelming or uninteresting, or maybe triggers that RSD fear of failure.
And finally, there's this really surprising coping mechanism that's been observed, the FIB response. We all know fight, flight, or freeze, but FIB.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Researchers Monica Hassel and Barbara Hunter observed this surprising fourth F fib.
So lying as a response to threat.
Essentially, yes. When faced with a threat, whether it's real or just perceived, children, adolescents, and even adults with ADHD might resort to fabrication. But it's crucial to understand this isn't usually about malice or intentional deceit.
What is it about then?
It's often a knee-jerk protective mechanism. A fib allows them to escape from fear, embarrassment, judgment, guilt, or shame, at least in that immediate moment.
So it's like an instant escape route from those painful feelings, maybe linked to that RSD we talked about.
Very possibly, yes. It's often an unconscious attempt to protect that fragile sense of self from perceived judgment or failure. It really highlights the intense emotional experience that often comes with ADHD.
Okay, so we've explored the inner workings of the ADHD brain, some of these unique characteristics. But ADHD doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? How do these traits interact with life's demands and change over time?
That's a crucial point. ADHD symptoms absolutely start in childhood, but they definitely evolve across the lifespan. It's not something most people simply grow out of.
Right.
So while kids might show more of that overt impulsivity and hyperactivity, the classic image adults often experience these differently. It might be more like a persistent, extreme restlessness, almost an internal buzzing they can't switch off.
Less bouncing off walls, more internal fidgeting.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And this can come alongside new or more pronounced challenges like memory problems, restlessness, and lack of mental focus. It's not that the ADHD disappears, it's more that how it manifests transforms, often becoming more internalized and perhaps less obvious to others.
So those childhood symptoms don't vanish, they just mature in a way, often becoming less external but just as challenging internally.
That's a good way to put it.
And it sounds like the increasing demands of adulthood can really amplify these evolving symptoms.
They absolutely can. Symptoms often become more severe when the demands of adulthood increase, impacting pretty much every area of life.
Like what?
We're talking about difficulties maintaining consistency at work, struggles with managing a home, effectively paying bills, keeping things organized, navigating social relationships, maintaining healthy habits like regular exercise, good nutrition, getting enough sleep.
All the adulting stuff?
All the adulting stuff. And if ADHD isn't identified or is left untreated, it can lead to serious challenges. Problems in school or work, difficulties in personal relationships, increased risks of substance misuse, injuries, accidents. And it can really breed low self-esteem or depression over time.
Wow, the consequences can be really far-reaching.
They can.
And you mentioned college students earlier. We've seen a big rise in diagnoses there. What makes that transition to college, in particular, such a perfect storm for students with ADHD?
Ah, yes. Clinical psychologist Arthur Anastopoulos calls it exactly that, a perfect storm. There's been a huge increase in college student diagnosed from maybe 2% 2 decades ago to over 11% now.
That's a massive
It is, and for first-year students especially, it's this collision of factors. Dramatically increased interpersonal and cognitive demands, harder classes, more complex social navigation.
Right. More independence.
Exactly. Suddenly decreased parental involvement and support combined with those still lingering executive function challenges, plus maybe ongoing symptoms of inattention or impulsivity. It's a massive shift in demands without the familiar support systems, making it incredibly difficult to navigate successfully on their own.
That makes perfect sense. It really highlights how deeply ADHD is intertwined with other conditions, too. It's rarely just ADHD in isolation, is it?
That's a critical point for understanding, and especially for treatment. And it's a complexity often missed. Over 2/3 of people with ADHD also have at least one other coexisting condition.
Or comorbidities, right?
Exactly, comorbidities. These are other health or mental health conditions that occur alongside the ADHD.
And the tricky part is the overlap.
That's the really tricky part. The symptoms of these coexisting conditions often overlap significantly with ADHD symptoms. This makes accurate diagnosis and differentiation incredibly complex. It's like trying to untangle an intricately intertwined spider's web. You pull one thread and the whole structure shifts. It's hard to tell where one issue ends and another begins.
So it's a web where symptoms from different conditions can look very similar, making it tough for both the individual and the clinician to figure out what's what.
Precisely.
What are some of the most common coexisting conditions or comorbidities that you see with ADHD?
There's a really broad and significant range. Very frequently, we see anxiety disorders, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, and mood disorders like major depression or bipolar disorder.
Okay.
Behavioral and conduct disorders are also common, especially in childhood, like oppositional defiant disorder, where kids really struggle with following rules and authority.
Right.
Learning disabilities often co-occur. Dyslexia is a common one, and then there's a less understood one, but it significantly impacts daily life. Auditory processing disorder, APD.
APD. Wait, what's that exactly?
Well, imagine your ears are working perfectly fine, your hearing test is normal, but your brain struggles to make sense of what it's hearing, especially when there's background noise.
So, like, words get jumbled.
Kind of. Words might fade in and out or blend into the background chatter. It makes it incredibly hard to follow conversations, especially in groups, or remember spoken instructions accurately. It's often misunderstood as simply not paying attention, but it's a processing issue.
Wow, that sounds frustrating. And it sounds like there are some particularly surprising overlaps, too, like with eating disorders and substance use.
Yes, those are really notable and often overlooked. Individuals with ADHD are at 3 to 6 times greater risk for developing eating disorders compared to neurotypical individuals.
3 to 6 times. Why is such a strong link?
Well, the impulsivity, the emotional dysregulation, the struggles with executive function, things like planning meals or impulse control around food, can make individuals more vulnerable. Sometimes unhealthy eating patterns become a coping mechanism for difficult emotions or a way to seek stimulation.
I see.
And research also shows that around 23% of females with eating disorders are on the autism spectrum, which itself can co-occur with ADHD, adding another layer of complexity.
Right. And cannabis use disorder.
Yes, CUD. The risk of developing cannabis use disorder is twice as high in people with ADHD. And what's really concerning is that the adverse effects of cannabis are especially amplified in people with ADHD.
Amplified. How so?
Partly due to the much higher THC concentrations in modern marijuana. It can actually worsen existing attention, memory, and motivation problems, even though someone might initially use it thinking it helps them relax or focus.
So it can backfire.
It often does, yes. All these overlaps just underscore how critical a comprehensive assessment is. You can't just look at the ADHD symptoms in isolation. You have to carefully consider each symptom cluster to get the right diagnosis and the right integrated support.
Okay, so given all these complexities, this intricate web of symptoms and comorbidities, let's talk about the diagnostic journey itself. If someone listening thinks, this sounds like me, or maybe sounds like their child or partner, what's the first step?
The first and most important step is simple. Talk with a healthcare provider.
Your regular doctor.
Yeah, your primary care doctor is a great starting point. They can do an initial assessment, maybe rule out other medical causes for the symptoms, and they can either diagnose ADHD themselves or, perhaps more commonly, refer you to a mental health professional who specializes in ADHD.
Like a psychologist or psychiatrist.
Exactly. Those specialists have the expertise for a really thorough evaluation. They're the essential gateway to getting proper assessment and support.
And what does that assessment typically involve? It sounds like it's much more than just, a quick chat or filling out one questionnaire.
Oh, definitely. It's comprehensive and multifaceted. Diagnosis usually includes detailed symptom checklists or rating scales, looking at current symptoms. But critically, it also involves taking a thorough history, looking back at the person's behavior, their experiences, their challenges, going all the way back to childhood.
Why back to childhood?
Because ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. By definition, the symptoms have to have been present and causing impairment before age 12 for a diagnosis. So the provider will look for evidence of that early onset and persistence.
Okay.
They might also ask for your permission to gather information from other people who know you well, family members, maybe a spouse, sometimes even teachers if it's for a child. These external perspectives can be incredibly insightful, especially for adults who might have developed really good masking strategies over the years.
Ah, right, the masking we talked about.
Exactly. And crucially, a medical exam and possibly some psychological testing might be needed to rule out other health problems that can cause symptoms like ADHD or that often coexist with it.
Like the anxiety, depression, sleep problems.
Exactly. Or substance misuse, other learning disabilities. They also need to consider if maybe a major life change or trauma or ongoing stress could be triggering symptoms that look like ADHD but might be temporary or have a different root cause.
So it's a careful process of elimination, too.
It really is. That challenge of differential diagnosis telling things apart is significant. It really highlights why you need a thorough, careful evaluation by someone experienced in ADHD.
That's so important, especially with all that potential overlap we discussed. And I know Dr. James M. Greenblatt has a really strong message about how parents and maybe individuals themselves should approach this, particularly about avoiding blame.
Yes, his advice is profound, I think. He says, don't mistake your child's ADHD symptoms for bad behavior.
That hits hard.
It does. He stresses the absolute importance of not assigning blame for behaviors that are tied to ADHD. This is a medical condition, remember. It's not a fault.
Right.
For parents, this means shifting away from criticism and punishment towards understanding and changing their own behavior and the environment to better support their child's unique needs.
And for adults managing their own ADHD.
It applies equally. It's about acknowledging a neurological difference, not a moral failing or a lack of effort. That shift empowers you to approach your challenges with self-compassion and to seek out effective strategies rather than just beating yourself up.
That reframing away from blame seems crucial for actually moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so once a diagnosis is made, how is ADHD typically treated? Is there like a single magic bullet solution that fixes everything?
If only. No, there is absolutely no single magic bullet. And that's a crucial takeaway for anyone living with ADHD or supporting someone who does.
Okay.
Treatment for ADHD is multifaceted. That means it usually involves a combination of different approaches working together.
Like what?
Typically, it involves medication, various forms of therapy or counseling, and significant lifestyle modifications or skills training the self-help strategies.
So a multi-pronged attack.
Exactly. And it's important to understand that medication, if used, is not a cure.
Not a cure. Right?
No. It helps manage symptoms, often very effectively, but it should be used in conjunction with other treatments or self-help strategies. It doesn't teach skills or change underlying thought patterns on its own.
Yeah.
And what works best is highly individualized. It really depends on the person, their specific symptoms, their coexisting conditions, their environment, their age. It requires close monitoring and adjustments over time to find the right mix.
Can you tell us a bit more about the medication options? There seems to be a lot of discussion, maybe even controversy, around stimulant medications especially.
Certainly. The most common and, frankly, the most well-researched medications for ADHD are the stimulants methylphenidate-based ones like Ritalin or Concerta, and amphetamine-based ones like Adderall or Vyvanse. There are also non-stimulant options available too, like atomoxetine or guanfacine.
How do the stimulants work?
Dr. Thomas E. Brown, another leading expert, explains it well. He emphasizes that stimulant medication safely and effectively improves communication between neurons in the ADHD brain. Essentially, they help increase the availability of those key neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine, particularly in the prefrontal cortex.
Helping the CEO function better.
That's a good way to think about it. And these medications aren't newfangled things. They've been around for decades. Amphetamine was first used in 1937, methylphenidate in 1956. They are incredibly well-researched and understood in terms of their effects and safety when used appropriately under medical supervision.
Okay. And you mentioned adjusting the dose.
Yes. A key part of the process, especially when starting medication or trying a new one, is titration.
Titration, what's that?
Titration is that careful, patient process of adjusting the dosage of a medicine to achieve the optimal effect while minimizing side effects. You usually start low and go slow.
Finding the sweet spot.
Exactly. Think of it like tuning a finely calibrated instrument. You're working with your doctor to find your unique sweet spot, the dose where the medication provides the best symptom relief with the fewest possible side effects. It ensures the treatment is truly personalized.
And it's interesting, you mentioned prescriptions increasing for adults recently.
Yes, data shows the percentage of adults, particularly females aged 12-49, receiving prescriptions for stimulants for ADHD symptoms increased significantly between 2016 and 2021, especially during the pandemic years. This likely reflects growing awareness and recognition of adult ADHD, especially in women who were historically underdiagnosed.
Okay. And what about the role of therapy? If someone's taking medication, do they still need therapy?
Therapy is incredibly important and highly complementary to medication. It helps individuals learn practical strategies and techniques to manage ADHD symptoms and improve their overall functioning in ways that medication alone can't.
So medication helps the brain chemistry, therapy helps with the skills and coping.
That's a great summary. For example, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is highly effective for ADHD. It can directly help improve prioritization skills, which tackles issues like that procrastination we talked about, figuring out what to do first when faced with multiple tasks.
Okay.
Therapy provides a structured place to develop practical coping mechanisms for organization, time management, emotional regulation. It helps challenge negative thought patterns that often accompany ADHD, like I'm lazy or I always fail. And it addresses the emotional impacts like low self-esteem, anxiety, or dealing with that RSD. It provides the how-to guide for living better with ADHD.
So we've covered the what and the why of ADHD, the diagnosis, the treatment approaches. Now for the really empowering part, the how. How do people take control and implement effective strategies for daily living? Let's dive into those practical pillars, starting with maybe the biggest beast for many, organization and taming clutter.
Ah, yes, the organization challenge. This is often the frontline battle, absolutely. Given those core issues of inattention and distractibility, just the thought of getting organized can feel completely overwhelming for adults with ADHD.
Yeah, where do you even begin?
Exactly. They often feel overwhelmed before they even start. But the good news is there are very concrete, actionable steps that can make a profound difference. It's about systems, not just willpower.
Okay, actionable steps. Let's unpack this. If someone's looking at a chaotic room or desk right now, where do they start?
The absolute key principle is break it down.
Break it down.
Don't try to organize your entire house or even your whole office at once. That is overwhelming. Instead, focus on only one area or room at a time, maybe just one drawer or one corner of the desk.
Small chunks.
Tiny chunks. And then, critically important, set a timer. Schedule only 30 minutes to an hour on each task, maybe even just 15 or 20 minutes to start. The timer creates structure and makes it feel less endless.
Okay, focus on one small area, set a timer. What about the actual decluttering?
Use clear categorizing boxes or piles. Toss, donate, and keep. Be decisive. And here's a pro tip. When you fill a donation box, immediately make an appointment for that action. Schedule a specific day and time on your calendar to take it to the drop-off point.
Ah, schedule the action, because otherwise the box just sits there.
Becoming another source of clutter and guilt. Exactly. You have to close the loop, bridge that intention-action gap.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, what about creating systems for those everyday items that always seem to go missing? Keys, wallet, phone.
That's essential for reducing daily frustration. You need to create a home for items that you use constantly.
A home.
Yeah. Designate a specific bowl, tray, or hook right near your main entry door. Make it obvious. And then build the habit. And it takes practice to always return those items, keys, wallet, sunglasses, phone, to their home the moment you walk in.
So it becomes automatic.
Eventually, yes. It dramatically reduces those frantic morning searches and the mental load of constantly tracking things. For other items like work files or craft supplies, use color coding or labels for storage bins and folders. Make it easy to see what's what at a glance.
So it's about making it effortless to put things back where they belong, not relying on perfect memory.
Exactly. You're designing systems for your brain.
What about daily habits? Mail seems to be a big one. That pile can grow terrifyingly fast.
Oh, the mail monster. Yes. The key is deal with mail on a daily basis. Don't let it pile up. Ideally, sort as soon as it comes in the door. Set aside just 2 or 3 minutes.
Sort, trash, file, act.
Exactly. Have a recycling bin right there. Have a simple to-do or to-pay spot. And even better, go paperless whenever you can. Opt for electronic statements, bills, newsletters. Minimize the physical stuff coming in.
Good tip. And for the papers you do need to keep.
Set up a simple filing system. Doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe just a few folders with clear labels or color coding. Keep it simple so you'll actually use it.
Okay. And for managing tasks, appointments, deadlines, all that stuff that can slip through the cracks, what tools or systems are most effective?
This is where technology can be your best friend. Effective use of a day planner or a calendar on your smartphone or computer can help you remember appointments and deadlines. The key is using the automatic reminders. Set multiple reminders if you need to.
Don't just put it on the calendar. Set the alert.
Yes, make it actively ping you. And make liberal use of lists and notes. Whether it's a digital app or a physical notebook, write things down. Don't rely on your memory for tasks, projects, deadlines. Get it out of your head and onto a list.
And what about tackling those small tasks that pile up?
The 2-minute rule. Practice the deal with it now principle. If a task like rinsing a dish, replying to a quick email, putting something away can be done in 2 minutes or less, do it on the spot.
Don't even put her on the list.
Exactly. Just get it done. It prevents those small things from accumulating into a big, overwhelming mess. And finally, to maintain progress, build in regular routines. Even just 15 minutes penciled into your schedule every evening to tidy up the main living area can make a huge difference. Consistency is absolutely key for building and maintaining these organizational habits.
That's a fantastic toolkit for organization, really tackling that inattention and overwhelm. But, okay, even if your space is organized, that time blindness we talked about can still wreak havoc. How do people with ADHD learn to recalibrate their sense of time and prioritize tasks more effectively?
This is a huge one, and often less visible than clutter, but just as impactful. As we discussed, adults with ADHD frequently lose track of time, miss deadlines, procrastinate, underestimate how much time they need for tasks, or just struggle doing things in the right order. And sometimes that hyperfocus ability works against them. They get absorbed in one interesting thing, and everything else, including time passing, just fades away.
Right, so how can someone become a better clock watcher, so to speak? Make time feel more real, more concrete.
Okay, first, literally use a wristwatch or highly visible wall or desk clock. Make time a physical, unavoidable presence in your environment. Don't rely solely on your phone, tucked away in a pocket.
Make time visible.
Yes. And second, when you start a task, actively make a note of the time by saying it aloud or writing it down. Just the act of consciously registering its 10-hour SDM engages your brain in tracking its passage.
Okay. And timers. You mentioned those for organization too.
Timers are absolutely crucial for time management too. Allot limited amounts of time for each task and use a timer or alarm. For big projects, definitely break them down into smaller subtasks, like we said for cleaning, maybe research topic for 25 minutes, write introduction for 25 minutes, use a timer like the Pomodoro technique.
Set the timer, focus, then take a break.
Exactly. When the timer goes off, you reassess. If you're still motivated, great, reset it. If not, take a planned break. This does two things. It breaks overwhelming tasks into manageable chunks, and it makes you aware of time passing in discrete blocks. It directly helps bridge that intention-action gap.
That makes the overwhelming feel much more approachable. What about estimating how long things will actually take? That seems notoriously difficult for many people, especially with ADHD.
It is. Because of that time blindness, adults with ADHD are often, let's be honest, notoriously bad at estimating time. Things almost always take longer than they think.
So what's the fix? Just guess longer.
Pretty much the practical advice is give yourself more time than you think you need. A good rule of thumb is for every 30 minutes you estimate a task will take, add at least 10 extra minutes as a cushion.
Build in buffer time.
Always build in buffer time. It sounds simple, but it's a vital strategy to reduce stress and prevent constant rushing or lateness. And for appointments, here's a clever trick. Write them down in your calendar for 15 minutes earlier than they really are.
Trick yourself into being early.
Exactly. It builds in that crucial buffer for getting ready, travel, unexpected delays, parking, whatever it is that always seems to make you late. It prevents that constant stress of racing against the clock.
Love it. Okay, and prioritization. This is huge. When you have 1,000 things demanding attention and your brain naturally gravitates towards what's most interesting or urgent, how do you consciously decide what to tackle first?
This requires conscious effort, definitely. The wisdom here is simple, but not always easy. Identify the single most important task for the day or the session, the one that will have the biggest impact or relieve the most pressure if completed.
Find the big rock.
Find the big rock, yes. And then order your other priorities around it. And again, always break large projects or jobs into smaller, manageable steps. Don't just put write report on your list. Break it down. Outline report, gather data, write section 1, etc. Use a detailed checklist or a step-by-step roadmap.
Make it less daunting.
Exactly. And once you've prioritized and broken it down, it's crucial to try and stay on task. Even using a timer specifically to enforce focus on that single priority item for a set period can help. This directly helps compensate for those executive function differences, that tendency to get pulled off course.
It sounds like a lot of these strategies require real conscious effort and self-awareness.
Yeah.
But impulsivity can also throw a wrench in things, right? Like leading to overcommitment, saying yes to too many things.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge one. Impulsivity can very easily lead adults with ADHD to agree to too many projects at work or make too many social engagements, often because they genuinely want to help or they get excited in the moment or they fear saying no because of that RSD.
Right.
But this inevitably leads to a jam-packed schedule that causes overwhelm, anxiety, dropped balls, and eventual burnout.
So what's the antidote?
A crucial and incredibly empowering skill is learning to say no.
Learning to say no. Easier said than done sometimes.
It really is, but it's vital. Saying no to non-essential tasks or requests empowers you to protect your time and energy. It allows you to focus on the crucial tasks, the ones that align with your priorities, so you can actually make headway on life's important goals, rather than just spinning your wheels being busy but not achieving what truly matters to you. It's about reclaiming control over your schedule and your focus.
Saying no to make space for the important yeses. Okay, next up, let's talk about the incredible power of routine and also how to minimize those pesky distractions that constantly seem to pull focus away, especially for an ADHD brain.
Absolutely. Establishing an overall routine is incredibly powerful. It might sound boring to some, but for the ADHD brain, routine helps your day run smoothly no matter what may crop up and significantly reduces stress.
How does routine reduce stress?
It reduces the number of decisions you have to make throughout the day. It automates things. It creates predictability, which can be very calming for a brain that often feels chaotic. It's about learning to consciously implement various structures and routines as habitual ADHD management tools. You're essentially building predictable pathways for your brain to follow, freeing up mental energy.
So it's about building consistent patterns into the day to reduce that decision fatigue and mental clutter. What are some practical tips for building those effective routines? Where can people start?
Start small and be consistent. Develop simple daily protocols for regular chores. For example, the routine of dropping your keys into your entry tray the moment you walk through the front door, or hanging up your jacket immediately instead of tossing it on a chair. Small habits add up.
Okay, what else?
Establish specific days and times for recurring tasks. Maybe Mondays are for mail sorting and bill paying. Wednesdays are laundry days. Saturday mornings are for grocery shopping. Create a standing grocery list on your phone so you're not reinventing the wheel every week.
Automate the recurring stuff.
Exactly. And lean on technology. Use electronic devices, apps, and smart technology to your advantage. Make it a habit to set recurring notifications and reminders for appointments, taking medications, even putting the trash out. Let technology be your reliable external brain for routines.
That makes sense. And what about exercise? How does fitting exercise into a routine physically help with managing ADHD beyond just general physical health?
Exercise is huge for ADHD management. We know it actively increases the availability of dopamine in the brain, that key neurotransmitter that's often lower in people with ADHD.
Right, we talked about dopamine. Yeah.
But beyond that, regular exercise significantly reduces anxiety, improves memory, reduces compulsive behavior, and improves executive function across the board. So making vigorous and ideally fun exercise a consistent part of the weekly routine is incredibly beneficial for both mind and body. It's a powerful non-pharmacological tool.
Okay, routine is powerful. Now, onto the flip side, minimizing distractions. This seems like an obvious need for ADHD, but it's probably much easier said than done when your brain is practically wired to seek out novelty and stimulation.
It absolutely is. Distraction is the name of the game sometimes. The goal here is to consciously engineer your environment and habits to reduce the opportunities for distraction.
Engineer your environment.
How? Start by physically decluttering and simplifying your surroundings at home, and especially at work. Visual clutter is mental clutter. It provides countless opportunities for your eye and mind to wander. A cleaner, more minimalist space can significantly reduce that mental load.
Less stuff, fewer things to get distracted by.
Exactly. Also, cultivate the habit of focusing on completing existing projects before starting new ones. Resist that powerful urge to jump to the next shiny, exciting idea before finishing what's in front of you. Easier said than done, I know.
Definitely. What about those ever-present electronic distractions? The phone buzzing, the emails pinging?
The digital deluge. First step. Be brutally honest with yourself about your primary diversions. Is it social media, news alerts, email notifications? Identify your main culprits.
Okay, self-awareness first, then what?
Then be proactive. Turn off notifications as much as possible. Route non-urgent calls to voicemail. Schedule specific times to check email and messages rather than reacting to every ping. Take control back from the alerts.
Create focused work blocks.
Yes. And use tools. Use noise-canceling headphones, even if you're not listening to anything, just to block out ambient noise.
Yeah.
Choose a quiet space to work whenever possible, or, interestingly, listen to music.
Music helps focus. Doesn't it distract sometimes?
It depends on the music. Research suggests that classical composers like Mozart or Bach and soothing instrumental music can actually help the ADHD brain stay on a more linear path and potentially address internal timing deficits. But definitely avoid loud songs with lyrics. Your brain will likely latch onto the words and get distracted by the narrative.
Interesting. Instrumental good, lyrics bad.
Yeah.
Got it. Any other environmental strategies?
If possible, adjusting your work schedule to start earlier or stay later when the office is quieter can be a game changer for some. And always trying to maintain a clean desk. Clearer desk, clearer mind.
Okay. But what about internal distractions? I know for me, sometimes my mind just goes off on tangents, even if I'm trying really hard to focus.
Yeah.
How do you handle those big ideas or random thoughts that pop up and threaten to derail the main task?
That's incredibly common, a direct result of that interest-based, often hyperassociative nervous system. Don't fake the thought necessarily, but don't follow it down the rabbit hole either. The advice is to have a system to capture it quickly.
Capture it.
Yeah. Jot them down on paper or your smartphone for later consideration. Just a quick note. Give that fleeting thought a temporary holding place so your brain feels acknowledged and can let it go for now, allowing you to return to your primary task.
So you don't lose the idea, but it doesn't derail you.
Exactly. Some people like to schedule 5 or 10 minutes at the end of their workday, specifically to review these captured random thoughts or big ideas. Also, for situations like meetings or lectures where you need to listen actively, try asking for materials in advance if possible. Use them to guide your listening and note-taking.
Be prepared.
Yes. And if you feel restless, don't just sit there squirming internally. Try to move around appropriately. Squeeze a stress ball, use a fidget tool discreetly under the table, stand up, or walk around during breaks. Even subtly shifting your weight can help. And echoing directions aloud softly to yourself can help confirm understanding and reinforce memory.
Okay, lots of practical tips there. Finally, let's talk about holistic well-being. It really sounds like all these strategies we've discussed, organization, time management, routine, managing distractions, ultimately feed into a larger goal of reducing stress and boosting mood, which can be so profoundly impacted by the daily grind of living with ADHD.
Precisely. It's all interconnected.
Right.
That cycle of disorganization, impulsivity, feeling overwhelmed, it often leads to secondary problems like erratic sleep patterns, an unhealthy diet, or too little exercise.
Which then makes the ADHD symptoms worse.
Exactly. It creates more stress, fuels bad moods, leads to feeling even more out of control. It's a vicious cycle. But the good news is you can break it. And the best way to do that is to consciously create healthy new routines that support your overall physical and mental well-being.
You mentioned exercise earlier as being great for dopamine and executive function. It sounds like it has even broader benefits for stress and mood, too.
Oh, absolutely. Exercise is perhaps the most positive and efficient way to reduce hyperactivity and inattention from ADHD. It's a fantastic stress reliever, a natural mood booster, and it actively helps calm the mind, working off that excess physical or mental energy and improving focus afterward.
What kind of exercise is best?
Whatever you find vigorous and fun enough to stick with daily, ideally, and if possible, exercise outdoors. Research suggests people with ADHD often benefit greatly from sunshine and the calming, restorative effects of being in green surroundings.
Get outside.
Get outside. And don't forget relaxing forms of movement, too. Things like mindful walking, yoga, or Tai Chi can be incredibly beneficial. They're not just relaxing, they actively teach attention regulation and impulse control through deliberate, focused movements and breath work.
Okay. And sleep. How crucial is sleep, especially given that feeling that the ADHD brain is always on?
Sleep is absolutely critical. It's non-negotiable for everyone, but especially with ADHD. Sleep deprivation can increase symptoms of adult ADHD, significantly making focus harder, emotions more volatile, and reducing your ability to cope with stress.
So prioritizing sleep is key. Any tips for improving sleep with ADHD?
Yes, standard sleep hygiene advice is extra important. Avoid caffeine late in the day. The cutoff might need to be earlier than for others. Exercise vigorously, but probably not within an hour or two of bedtime, as it can be too activating for some. Create a predictable, calming, quiet bedtime routine. Maybe a warm bath or shower, reading a physical book, not a screen. Dim lights to signal to your body it's time to wind down. And crucially, stick to a regular sleep-wake schedule as much as possible, even on weekends, to regulate your body's natural circadian rhythm.
Consistency again. Okay, what about diet? Does what we eat really impact ADHD symptoms, or is that just an old wives' tale?
While unhealthy eating habits don't cause ADHD, there's growing evidence that a poor diet can exacerbate symptoms.
Exacerbate them. How?
Think about blood sugar swings from too much sugar or refined carbs that can definitely worsen irritability, hyperactivity, and focus problems. Even simple dietary changes can lead to noticeable reductions in distractibility, hyperactivity, and stress levels for some individuals.
So what kind of simple changes?
Things like eat small, frequent meals throughout day that include protein to maintain stable blood sugar and energy levels. Avoid sugar and junk food as much as possible. Include healthy protein at every meal, eggs, lean meats, fish, beans, nuts, and aim for several servings of fiber-rich whole grains each day. Things like oatmeal, brown rice, whole wheat bread for sustained energy release. These choices provide a more stable fuel source for the brain.
Makes sense. Okay, and mindfulness meditation. It feels almost counterintuitive for a brain that struggles with hyperactivity, the mind constantly racing. But it's listed as a powerful tool. How does that work?
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance, but regular mindfulness meditation is a practice, a training exercise for the brain. It's a powerful tool that can directly help you better resist distractions, lower impulsivity, improve your focus, and provide more control over your emotions.
How do you even start if your mind won't sit still?
You start small. If hyperactivity is a challenge, begin by meditating for very short periods, maybe just 1 or 2 minutes, and gradually increase the time as you get more comfortable. The goal isn't to empty your mind, but to notice when it wanders and gently bring it back.
Practice noticing and returning.
Exactly. The key is to view your mind and attention span as muscles. Like any muscle, they strengthen with consistent practice. Mindfulness trains that attention muscle, allowing you to gradually draw on those skills, noticing distractions, managing impulses, regulating emotions in your daily life off the cushion.
That's a great analogy, thinking of attention as a muscle you can train. And finally, a really important point that ties a lot of this together. Respecting your own limitations, knowing when to stop, when to say no.
Yes, this is absolutely the capstone for empowerment and long-term well-being. It's so common for people with ADHD, maybe due to impulsivity or time blindness or people-pleasing tendencies linked to RSD, to overextend themselves.
Taking on too much.
Way too much. Taking on too many tasks, underestimating the time and energy required for things. This inevitably leads to immense pressure, feeling scattered, chronic stress, and burnout.
So what's the solution?
Learning how to live well with ADHD involves recognizing when you've reached your limit and need to remove tasks from your plate. It requires honest self-assessment and boundary setting.
So it's okay to do less.
It's more than okay. It's often necessary. It allows you to realistically commit to less and deliver more often. When you're not constantly overcommitted and failing to meet unrealistic expectations, your self-worth actually increases. You build confidence by succeeding at what you do commit to. And always remember, while these self-help strategies are incredibly powerful, professional guidance is there too.
Right. Therapy, medication management.
Counseling, coaching, even looking into workplace accommodations if needed. You don't have to figure it all out alone. Combining self-management with professional support is often the most effective path to thriving with ADHD.
Okay, so to recap this whole deep dive, ADHD is clearly a complex neurodevelopmental disorder. It involves unique brain wiring, it shows up in varied ways, and it profoundly affects those executive functions, emotions like with RSD, and even the perception of time itself. We've really dug into the definitions, the symptoms, the consequences, and hopefully learned some crucial new vocabulary.
But, and this is the hopeful part, as we've seen throughout this discussion, it's also highly manageable. With the right combination of professional support medication, therapy, and these kinds of strategic self-help techniques, focusing on organization, time management, building routines, and prioritizing holistic well-being, significant improvements are absolutely possible.
You really do have the power, if this resonates with you, to become more productive, organized, and in control of your life, and improve your sense of self-worth by understanding these challenges and starting to implement some of these practical tools.
And as we wrap up, maybe here's a final provocative thought for you to consider. If the ADHD brain is truly an interest-based nervous system, and it struggles so profoundly with tasks deemed uninteresting, what does this really suggest about the fundamental design of our modern world?
like our education systems or our typical work environments.
Exactly. How might we need to fundamentally rethink them, not just to accommodate, but to actually harness the unique strengths, the creativity, the hyperfocus, the outside-the-box thinking of these divergent minds, rather than constantly trying to force square pegs into round holes?
That is definitely a question worth pondering long after this deep dive is over. We really hope this exploration has given you some valuable insights and, more importantly, some practical steps you can try. Remember, the journey of understanding and managing ADHD, whether it's your own or someone else's, it's an ongoing one, but it's filled with continuous discovery and incredible potential for growth.